Yep, it was rock solid. To Sasuke's amazement, Naruto seemed to channel red lightning onto the sandy rock.
He was about to stop him, telling him that he might hit Sakura with her lightning, when cracks appeared in the claw around Sakura.
It then shattered, freeing Sakura.
Naruto caught her before she could faceplant on the branch. He handed her to an open-mouthed Sasuke.
How did you that? Naruto waved a hand. Not the time, Sasuke. Maybe later.
He then flashed away to a kunai that was on the tree right before the one on which the explosion occurred.
He whistled, thoroughly impressed at the results of the explosion.
The entire right half of Gaara's armor had collapsed, and the other half was barely holding on. Naruto wasted no time in seizing this chance. Ever since he arrived in this area, he had dispersed a moderate amount his own chakra in the air. Grasping that chakra, he entirely converted it to water.
Dog Tiger, Suetun, Daisuagaden no Jutsu.
Just as it had happened with Jiraiya, a huge spinning drill of water took form behind Naruto, going above him and rushing down towards a dumbstruck Gaara. He was so focused on recovering and reforming his armor that the water drill had caught him completely off guard. He couldn't even move when the drill crashed into him right into his stomach, with brutal force.
To Naruto's immense satisfaction, Gaara impacted the ground with such force that when the drill finally dispersed, Gaara had been buried into the ground in a crater that was shaped like his own body.
All the sand that had been reformed had dispersed from his body, even the sand that was left after the explosion. The only thing that indicated that Gaara was still using his Bijuu chakra were his eyes. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and the kanji for the 5 elements seal once again formed on his fingertips. He dropped down from the branch, hand once again outstretched.
Gaara was angry and confused. Uzumaki had once again put his sand out of commission.
He was now dropping from the branch, heading towards him with his hand outstretched and his fingertips glowing. His mother was shouting in his head to do something.
Gaara! I want him dead.
Use my power, and crush him for good.
Give me his blood.
All the stress, attacks from Naruto, his failed attempts to draw blood and patience going towards negative finally did it for Gaara.
I won't lose to you, Uzumaki Naruto.
Naruto was within 5 meters from Gaara's now exposed stomach when his danger sense rang haywire.
He instinctively flashed to the farthest kunai, which surprisingly turned out to be Temari. Temari jumped when Naruto suddenly appeared beside her.
She put a hand on her chest, heart pumping wildly. You really shouldn't startle people like that.
Naruto shot back, that's the only purpose I do it. What are you doing here anyways? I thought you were injured.
His gaze turned quizzical. Temari folded her arms. I was able to heal myself with the medical supplies I had and what little I knew of medical jutsu. Truthfully speaking, she was downright impressed with the way Naruto had handled Gaara. Not many knew of the weak spot Naruto had chosen to exploit. Most of the times, they were busy escaping Gaara's attempts to kill them.
Naruto had not only bested Gaara's attacks, but had managed to corner him twice. Naruto nodded and turned back where Gaara was.
It seemed he had flashed for good reason, for Gaara was no longer there. In his place, a huge raccoon made of sand stood, towering clear above the forest. They seemed like ants in its comparison. A huge amount of chakra had been molded right before Naruto had flashed away. Naruto stared at the one-tailed tanuki with unusually grave eyes.
This is quite bad, he muttered. Temari gave him a look like he had lost his mind. Quite? This is very, very bad.
You can't stop him when he goes into this form.
Suddenly, Naruto turned around and blocked a shuriken that was meant for Temari. Sasuke appeared one branch away, clearly angry. What are you doing, Naruto? She is the enemy.
Naruto held a hand to calm the Avenger down.
She isn't our enemy anymore, Sasuke. Don't attack her. Sasuke's expression turned confused. What do you mean? Naruto then tilted his head towards the giant tanuki. We have bigger problems to deal with, that's why. Sasuke grit his teeth and angrily gestured to the tanuki. How the hell are you going to stop that?
Naruto then turned away and looked up, all 3 of them tensing when he saw its head turning to face them.
He quickly said, both of you, get away from here as far and as fast as you can. Temari spoke the question before Sasuke did, "What about you?"
Naruto gave her a discreet wink, whispering, "Trust me."
Out loud, he spoke, "I have a plan. Now go." Sasuke looked reluctant to leave Naruto behind, so did Temari.
But they still followed his command. Sasuke turned around and tree-hopped away, Sakura safe in his arms. Temari was about to go as well when Naruto whispered to her, "Keep a safe distance from Sasuke. Even though I told him not to attack you, he still might do it."
Temari nodded and was about to jump when she noticed she couldn't move.
Naruto and her both looked down in horror to see both of their feet stuck in sand, with the sand crawling up their bodies.
Naruto acted on instinct. He quickly put a hand on Temari's back and sent her to the farthest point he could, which he sensed was moving away. He had no time to ponder on that because he was completely covered by sand. Gaara watched in his bijou form from above as he finally had Uzumaki Naruto in his grasp, and this time, there was no escape. He clutched his claw into a fist. Sabaku Q.
Usually when he used the desert coffin, blood would explode outwards, along with the muscles and organs. It always gave Gaara great pleasure to use it. But this time, instead of blood, only smoke seemed to come out.
Gaara was confused. Why did smoke come out?
Temari had been utterly surprised when one moment, she was standing beside Naruto, her feet stuck in sand.
The next moment, she had suddenly appeared midair beside Uchiha Sasuke.
Sasuke was equally surprised, and nearly lost his footing on the next branch. Temari was barely able to land on her legs, let alone make a graceful landing. Temari was not so surprised, since she had witnessed Naruto send Shikamaru down for their fight the same way, using Hiraishin. Sasuke, on the other hand, was stunned on a much higher level.
He can even send people through that jutsu? If he sent her here, does he know that I have one of his kunai? Did Naruto send you? Temari looked at Sasuke and scowled.
For some reason, she hated that bastard.
Yeah, he did.
However, all her breath left her lungs when she heard the gravelly voice of Gaara, amplified in his bijou form.
Sabaku Q.
No, Temari thought with eyes full of terror as she turned back to the area of the fight. She almost expected Naruto to flash beside her, easily avoiding the one-hit kill. Seconds trickled by, and the blood fully drained from her face.
Gaara had killed Naruto.
Sasuke froze on the branch for a completely different reason. While he had undoubtedly displayed potent jealousy towards Naruto for having techniques far superior to his own, he still considered Naruto his comrade, and Naruto was the closest thing to a friend that Sasuke had. Back in the stadium, his thoughts had been clouded with hatred and jealousy. But while fighting Gaara, the cloud had somewhat shifted, and he had gained respect for the blonde to handle Gaara the way he did. Naruto may have been a genius, but that alone doesn't make you powerful.
Sasuke trained his ass off daily to get stronger.
For Naruto to be this strong, he must have worked way harder than him.
Which meant only one thing. Sasuke would do anything he could to catch up to Naruto. Anything.
But witnessing the death of that comrade made him reflect back to their bell test. Kakashi had told them that people who broke the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. He had abandoned Naruto to face his death, even if the blonde had told him to go himself.
Itachi had abandoned the entire Leaf and by extension, his comrades. Sasuke had abandoned his comrade. Oh God, did that mean they were the same?
Before more horror could fill his being, a scream of horror from Temari snapped him out of his thoughts.
Naruto. Temari wanted to deny all of it.
She wanted to deny that Naruto had fallen prey to Gaara's sand, but the truth was right in front of her, as if mocking her for not being able to do anything. She had these strange feelings growing inside her ever since she started meeting Naruto in the week before the exams.
Feelings that she couldn't make any sense out of.
She didn't meet him just because she wanted to learn his secrets for her village, no. She genuinely enjoyed spending time with him. He had become a sort companion that she never wanted to let go of, but reality struck hard.
Naruto.
Suddenly, a huge amount of smoke appeared before them, causing both of them to gape. The amount of smoke released was large, easily large enough that it could cover the giant tanuki. Only, it wasn't a tanuki that emerged from the smoke.
XXXXXXX Naruto barely been able to make a shadow clone in time. However, he did it so fast that he doubted someone could have seen him doing it, even if they were standing in front of him. He had created the shadow clone with specific orders in mind. As soon as the clone flickered into existence, it vanished from its spot near instantaneously, Flash stepping behind a tree. Then, it substituted with the Prime, taking his place inside the coffin. It grinned when he thought what Gaara's reaction would be when he saw that Prime had managed to escape. It was its last thought before dispelling into smoke. Behind a tree, Naruto was preparing his next technique. It was the only one he could think of that could deal with Gaara's current form, and hopefully, it would be one of the last he would ever have to use against Gaara. Cutting his left thumb, he swiped it against his right palm. Boar dog bird monkey ram. Kuchios no Jutsu. Before the exam, he had calculated that he required exactly a quarter of his reserves to summon Takashi. However, after Kurama had increased his reserves, the amount had dropped significantly. The quarter of his previous amount of reserves that he previously required had now become 2/3 of the same quarter, which meant an entire 1/6 of his reserves. Of course, Naruto had roughly estimated this with Kurama's help. In a huge blast of smoke, Naruto towered above the tree line, easily standing a head above the tanuki on top of Takashi's head. He had his arms crossed as he looked down on Shukaku's form. It gave him a sense of authority, of power. Takashi blinked as he appeared with his arms crossed. He quickly deduced that Naruto had summoned him. "Ah, it seems you require my assistance, Naruto." Naruto lightly laughed on top of Takashi's head. Very acute observation, Takashi-san. Takashi chuckled at his summoner's cheek before turning a serious, yet still a bit amused eye forward. "Ichibi no Shukaku, huh? You sure do have an eye for strong opponents, Naruto. This might turn out to be a good fight after all." Takashi grinned, his sharp teeth menacingly coming into view as he grasped the katana strapped onto the left side of his waist in anticipation. Naruto nodded and explained his plan to the boss of the foxes. Right now, the Jinchuriki is in the final state of his transformation, but still in control. Our goal is to influence him enough that he would relish the control over to the tailed beast via falling asleep. Once Shukaku's consciousness is in control, I want you to hold him in one place while I wake up the host. Once Gaara is awake, I will slap a seal onto him that will cut him off from his tailed beast. Takashi listened carefully to Naruto's plan, and nodded in agreement. He couldn't help but comment, however, fighting an opponent like Shukaku at their strongest? You really know how to bring excitement into a fight, Naruto. Takashi was clearly excited to fight. He did not wait for his opponent to make his move. Naruto was glad he had stuck to Takashi's head using his chakra, otherwise he would have fallen backwards on his butt. Just as Takashi came within striking distance, Gaara reacted. Shukaku's arm came forward to grab Takashi's throat, but he wasn't fast enough. Instead of dodging the arm, Takashi unsheathed his katana and in one clean stroke, Gaara's entire right arm came straight off. XXXXXXX stared in amazement at what Naruto had managed to pull out of his sleeve this time. It was a humongous, dark blue fox in a white haori, with 7 tails swaying behind magnificently. And it was large enough to tower over the tanuki. What is that? She uttered in disbelief. Was it one of Naruto's summons? Sasuke was in a similar state. He was at a loss of words for this, whatever Naruto had managed to pull off. But whatever it was superior to even the tanuki in size. It was clearly very strong. The 7 swaying tails had fully thrown him off. With the exchange of words that followed, Sasuke was able to deduce that this was a summon, which meant that Naruto was the holder of a summoning contract. He couldn't hear what Naruto said, but it was clearly a signal to start fighting. Both Sasuke and Temari then proceeded to watch, utterly dumbstruck and stupefied. The giant blue fox cleanly cut one of Gaara's arms. XXXXXXX Takashi skidded away, destroying a group of trees in his wake and not even noticing. His eyes narrowed as he clutched his blade tightly. His body is denser than I had thought. I nearly lost the grip of my blade, he said as he put the katana back in its sheath. We'll have to be more careful now. This should be provocation enough for him to let Shukaku out. Get ready, Naruto. Yeah. Naruto nodded and braced himself. He carefully watched Gaara as he slowly reattached his arm. Once he had done so, he turned his head towards them. Interesting, he rumbled, causing both Takashi and Naruto to tense. How interesting, Uzumaki Naruto. They watched as Gaara came out of the giant tanuki's head in a ripple, his eyes completely white. Naruto supposed that was because his sight was in the tanuki's eyes. He was slumped, but slowly straightened up. Naruto was further on guard when he saw Gaara smiling a little. He knew what came next, but no matter how many times he saw Gaara smile, it was always unnerving. You are strong, Uzumaki, Gaara said, and Naruto could hear anticipation in his voice. You have matched my every attack with yours, and were able to overpower me, if only for a little while. I haven't had this much fun in all my life. The last shout caused Naruto to feel a bit sad inside. He couldn't help but reflect that this was how he could have ended up. Gaara had been alienated most of his life. He could see that only Temari had attempted to make Gaara feel as close to family as possible, but he had ruthlessly pushed her away. They say that you can learn a lot about a person from fighting them, and it was true. Naruto had seen how Gaara fought. Gaara only fought for himself. He thought that he had no precious people of his own. Well, Naruto was about to give him a smackdown for free, in addition to a reality check. Gaara formed the ram seal. As my gratitude towards you for keeping me entertained, I'll let you see the full power of the sand incarnation. Feigning sleep jutsu. For a moment, Gaara remained frozen in that pose, mad eyes glaring into Naruto's prepared ones. And then, he sagged, arms hanging limply as his head fell forward. Here we go, Takeshi-san, Naruto whispered to the fox, who hummed low in agreement. XXXXXXX Sasuke shivered with a little fear. This wasn't the first time he had watched his teammate take on a stronger opponent than any of them, while he just cowered in the background. Looking up at Gaara's form, he took back his words. Gaara had a lot more chakra than what he estimated. To have enough chakra to form a construct like that, he doubted even Naruto had that much chakra. Temari watched fearfully as Naruto tackled Gaara at his strongest. As confident as Naruto seemed, she doubted he could scrape victory when Gaara let Shukaku out to fight. But Naruto looked so sure of his victory, like he knew exactly what to do, that Temari simply had to trust he knew what he was doing. She couldn't bear to lose both Naruto and Gaara in the same day. XXXX Yahoo! Finally, I am out and free. The one-tailed monster opened its enormous jaw, and the high, crazy voice surprised Naruto a bit. He had been imagining a voice similar to Kurama's. Shukaku looked in front of him and cheered, coiling in preparation for an attack. Oh. A guy for me to kill already. And it looks like you're related to that asshole Kyuubi. I'll make mincemeat out of you. Naruto winced as Kurama roared in rage inside him. He really couldn't be sure if Shukaku was referring to him or Takashi. Probably Takashi. You know, because of his tails. Takashi gave a challenging grin full of teeth. Why don't you put those words to test? Let's see how far you can get. Shukaku slapped his large, bloated stomach. Futon, Rankuden. A bullet of air so compressed and pressurized came shooting towards Takashi, who surprised both Naruto and Shukaku when he deftly used one of his tails to smack away the air bullet at just the right angle. He just shifted its direction a bit, so instead of damaging the landscape, it went flying into the sky behind him. My turn, Takashi grinned before performing 3 hand seals, ending on Tiger. He took a deep breath. Keton, Goen no Jutsu. An enormous vortex of rapidly expanding flames expelled from his mouth and rushed towards Shukaku. The heat from the flames was so hot that even Naruto, who was standing behind the wall of fire, felt it. The entire land of forest beneath the majestic flame was scorched to ashes. Naruto was willing to bet that the fire was hot enough to turn Shukaku's sand to glass. Shukaku, as soon as he saw the Herculean fire heading towards him, erected a huge wall of sand with his hand. He would have dodged it normally, but because of his huge bulk, he was slow to put himself to motion. It was better to have a hand turned to glass rather than any other part of his body.
The flames hit the wall of sand, and for a full 5 seconds, Takashi kept pumping chakra into his fire, making it hotter in each second.
When he finally released the jutsu, both Naruto and Takashi grinned at the results.
xTemari gaped in speechlessness as the wall that Shukaku had erected with his hand had completely melted into hot, molten liquid. The amount of firepower that summons seemed to have was completely absurd and ridiculous.
Sasuke was also dumbstruck at the new development.
The heat from the summon's fire had been hot enough to be felt way over where they were standing. He had seen what had happened to the forest beneath it, and he almost felt bad for anything standing in front of it. Shukaku winced as he saw his entire hand was now molten sand, which was slowly melting from the solid shape that he had formed it into. However, before he could do anything about it, he heard another shout.
Futun, kamikaze! A huge amount of wind was expelled from Takashi's mouth.
It had no shape, it simply was wind blowing at great speeds. Since the sand construct was still melting, Shukaku didn't have enough time to detach himself from it.
Takashi took full advantage of it and chose to cool down the molten sand, transforming it into glass. Shukaku looked at his hand in disbelief.
His whole right arm, that was still attached to his body, had become solid glass.
It was rather surreal to see. Takashi laughed, "Make mincemeat out of me?
Take a look at yourself first." And with speed that even Naruto did not expect from him, he shot forward in 3 quick strides.
Naruto was stunned just how quickly Takashi was able to move.
However, his next choice of attack almost had Naruto jumping in joy.
Takashi had reared back his fist and punched right at the strange-shaped wall of glass.
Shukaku had no choice but to block the punch with his now wall of glass, formerly wall of sand. If he could get rid of the glass, he could form a new hand then. Then, he would kill this blasted fox. The glass shattered like, well, glass. It shattered into pieces. The part of the arm that had become glass was almost up to his shoulder. So almost the entire arm shattered under the tremendous force of Takashi's punch.
Shukaku was now visibly panicking.
He swung his good left arm, claws outstretched to swipe Takashi's head off, but Takashi was quick to counter.
Takashi grabbed the left arm with his right, followed by grabbing the swinging tail that came from Shukaku's right. Takashi held them in a strong grip, not allowing Shukaku any chance to attack.
Well, if you don't count the regenerating arm and the purple ball of no doubt, highly destructive chakra that was forming in front of Shukaku's mouth, aimed right onto Takashi's alarmed face.
Do it now, Naruto. You really don't want to be at the other end of that thing.
Takashi's warning had a high amount of urgency in it, and Naruto did not want to find out what that ball of chakra did, so he didn't hesitate to act. He directed his chakra into his legs and jumped high. With a grunt, he threw the kunai downwards, aiming it so it lodged right in front of an asleep Gaara. As expected, Gaara's sand came up to catch the kunai, but it was of no consequence. Naruto flashed right in front of Gaara, already in motion of an attack. He caught Gaara's jaw in an earth-shattering right hook, which had so much force behind it that it not only sent Gaara leaning towards his own right, but also knocked a tooth out of his mouth.
Wake the fuck up. The punch sent waves of pain to Gaara's brain, forcing him to wake up.
His eyes flew open in agony, just as Naruto sensed the big ball of chakra harmlessly dispelling behind him.
Shukaku's yell soon followed, and oh, I just came out. Gaara was now wide awake, but Naruto gave him no chance to attack him with his sand. He used his left hand to roughly grab Gaara by his throat, bringing his face level to his. His fingertips of the right hand lit up in the Gogyo Fuin for the 3rd time in the day. He slapped them right onto Gaara's exposed stomach, the usage of chakra making his seal visible. Gaara gasped as all the breath left him, and he momentarily became unconscious. Naruto had successfully managed to cut Shukaku off from Gaara's conscious.
The sand form beneath them began to crumble, and just in seconds, the entire body of sand collapsed, making them plummet to earth. Naruto and Gaara would have hit the ground with bone-breaking force if Naruto hadn't managed to grab Gaara midair and flashed to a kunai on the ground. He carefully set Gaara against a tree, and was slightly taken aback when Gaara started to stir. He himself had needed a day to wake up when Orochimaru had slapped him with the same seal.
Perhaps it was that due to Gaara's stronger connection to Shukaku, he already had large amounts of Bijou chakra in his system which helped him wake? Naruto stood over Gaara as the redhead fully opened his eyes. Looking disoriented for a second, his eyes widened as he saw Naruto standing over him with an expressionless look on his face. He tried to shift further into the tree. "No, stay away from me," he cried weakly, far too weak to try and move his body. He watched with pure fear as Naruto knelt down. Naruto softened the look on his face. "That pain out of being alone, of your life not meaning anything to anyone, I know that pain all too well, Gaara." Gaara whispered in confusion, "How?" Naruto's lips twisted into a sad smile, "Because we are alike. I also house a beast like yours." Gaara's confused expression twisted into one of shock. "Then, for all those people, why?" Naruto put a hand on Gaara's tuft of hair, "Because I found people to care for, to protect. Who loved me and acknowledged my existence. Those people told me as many times I needed to hear that they loved me. They told me that my purpose in this world was to protect. True power doesn't come from fighting for yourself. It comes when you have someone of your own to protect." "Gaara," he ruffled the red hair, "you have people like that too. If you just give them a chance, they would accept you. If you want, I'll be your first friend." Gaara was unable to answer, just staring at Naruto with wide eyes. Naruto chuckled and removed his hand, standing up. They were here anyways. Temari and Kankuro appeared just beside Gaara. The difference was that Kankuro was injured, and still on guard when standing in front of Naruto. He looked at Naruto with a wary expression, knowing that he stood no chance against a guy who still didn't look that exhausted after outright crushing Gaara. Temari, on the other hand, just stared at Naruto with wide eyes. He had delivered on his promise. He had stopped Gaara without killing him. And she was grateful to him for that. Naruto looked at her and winked. "I promised you, didn't I?" Temari smiled softly and nodded. She was grateful that Gaara hadn't been killed, along with the fact that Gaara hadn't managed to kill Naruto. She didn't know if she could ever repay Naruto for what he had done for her. A hand brushed against her leg, causing her to look down. "Temari, Kankuro. That's enough, let's go home," Gaara ordered weakly. Kankuro gave a confused look to Temari, who just nodded to comply with the request. He picked Gaara up, supporting him with one hand around his waist and the other holding Gaara's over his shoulder. "Kankuro," Temari said, causing the puppeteer to look at her, "take Gaara and move. I'll catch up." She did not once break eye contact with Naruto. Kankuro gave her a confused look, but Temari "Go, I said." Kankuro looked reluctant to leave her behind, but obeyed her nonetheless. He took to the trees and in a few moments, they were just a dot in the distance. No doubt, Kankuro would wait ahead for her to catch up, but he knew when Temari wanted him to be out of sight, and he wasn't stupid enough to disobey her. Naruto just kept his hands in his pockets as Temari stepped closer. Somehow, he wasn't surprised at all when Temari suddenly grabbed him in a tight hug, her hands going around his waist and her head buried in his chest. Thank you," she was sobbing in his chest. Naruto slowly wrapped his own arms around her shoulders. He kissed her head softly, stroking her hair. "It's okay," he whispered. He really didn't know what else he could do. Temari tightened her hold on him. "Why would you go so far for him?" Naruto breathed deeply, trying to decide what to say. He and I were not much different. We both share a burden, and we both have been alone in our lives. Me not as much as him. I just couldn't bear to look at him like he was. He is what I would have been if I had no people of my own. He has people of his own. He has me and Kankuro." Naruto nodded sadly, "But he chose to push you away, while I accepted the few people I had in my life." "It's still not too late, Temari. Just keep showing him what love truly means, and he will come to you. Give him another chance to accept." Temari slowly looked up to him with tears glistening in her eyes. Naruto slowly removed his arms from her, stepping back. "You should go now. Konoha Shinobi might be here any moment." Temari pursed her lips, but nodded.
She turned away, about to jump to the trees, but she hesitated. Naruto waited for Temari to jump away, but she looked hesitating. Temari dash he never finished his sentence, for a pair of lips came to softly rest on his own. Naruto looked shocked only for a moment, but before he could wrap his arms around her, Temari separated and turned away, taking to the trees. Naruto's hand came to rub on his lips, feeling the taste of her own. He smiled, there was something else in that kiss.
Something that promised a better future.
Still smiling, he turned around, only to freeze on spotting Sasuke, who was carrying Sakura in a piggyback.
Sasuke was looking extremely shocked and confused. He did not know what or how to make sense out of this. What the hell was that? Naruto panicked for a second, but then got a grip and replied, "A kiss, what else could it be?" He turned around to go and gather his kunai, but Sasuke stopped him again. No. I mean, why did she kiss you?
Naruto turned around with a frown. I don't know what goes on in her head.
But what the hell are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to take Sakura and head back to safety?
This time, Sasuke surprised Naruto by looking abashed of all things. He muttered something unintelligible, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow.
Sorry, couldn't hear you. Come again? I said I couldn't leave you behind, okay? Sasuke snapped, a hint of red on his cheeks.
Naruto snorted and walked past the boy. It's rare to see you worry about someone else.
But don't worry about me. As long as you have that kunai with you, I can flash to you anytime.
Naruto suspected Sasuke had taken the kunai not so Naruto could flash to him, but to decipher the secret behind it. Sasuke wasn't an idiot, he obviously had noticed it in his fight with Gaara what he used the kunai for, and he wanted the jutsu for himself.
Too bad for him.
In his notes, Minato had written down that he had taken the jutsu to levels that were seemingly impossible. He had developed it so far that in fact, it almost became a sort of an artificial bloodline. A jutsu that could only be used by someone of his blood, that too counting in all the few ninjutsu processes that involve locking your chakra at each step.
Sasuke mentally flinched at that. He forgot to take into account that Naruto could sense all of his kunai. He had to divert the topic fast before Naruto asks him to give it back. Why did you let them go?
That question caught Naruto's attention as he picked the last of the Hiraishin kunai scattered on the ground. He slowly turned to face Sasuke. He opened his mouth to explain why, but stopped at the sudden rush of chakra in his system, as well as memories.
What the hell?
Sasuke watched curiously as Naruto's head snapped towards the direction of the stadium, a classic expression of what the fuck on his face.
What is it? Naruto turned to face Sasuke, a sense of urgency on his face that wasn't there before. You need to get back to Kakashi right now.
He stepped forward, a hand outstretched, probably to send him to Kakashi.
Sasuke stepped back. Whoa. You are not sending me back like that. Not until you tell me why. Naruto grit his teeth as more memories flowed into his mind.
He did not have time for this.
I can't tell you right now because someone close to me is in danger.
How about this, I'll tell you once the invasion is over and you promise me, right now, that you won't tell a soul about this until I tell you so.
Deal?
Sasuke thought over it a bit and said, alright, but you better tell Dash he wasn't allowed to finish as Naruto put a hand on his forehead and forcefully sent him back to where Kakashi was.
He might have finished the enemies in the stadium by now.
He flashed, and within 10 seconds, he had gathered every kunai that had been scattered in the area. After inspecting the clearing for one last time, he flashed again.
Hold on, Gigi. I'm coming. XXXXXXXTemari and Kankura were supporting Gaara on each of his sides as they made their way back to Suna. With Gaara's defeat, the invasion was moot. Naruto made a good point about Gaara, she thought.
They allowed Gaara to push them away, and her efforts had been clearly not enough to make him come back to her.
Gaara had pushed them away as well.
Their father, in hopes of strengthening Gaara as fast as he could, sent assassins to kill him. While none could get past his sand, Gaara still wanted to be close to them.
However, something happened, and suddenly, Gaara became the cold person he was.
He cared only about himself. She figured that the amount of killing attempts finally broke him, convincing that no one would care for him or acknowledge his existence. Then Naruto came along and, unlike anyone they had ever met, proceeded to beat Gaara into the ground until he was willing to hear what Naruto had to say.
Temari knew that Naruto had changed Gaara's outlook on life permanently.
She had witnessed hope in Gaara's life for the first time in years. Hope that he could make a life for himself like Naruto had did. Temari, Kankuro, a voice snapped her out of her thoughts. She turned her head to face Gaara, who was still not meeting her eyes. Kankuro shot a questioning look at his sister, but his confusion turned to shock when Gaara uttered a single word.
Sorry. Both the older siblings were shocked that Gaara apologized to them.
For years, Gaara viewed everyone as beneath him. For him to apologize, it meant Naruto's words had had a deep effect on him. Temari smiled, they were in Naruto's debt for this.
It's okay, little brother. XXXXXXX Kakashi looked tiredly around the stadium.
A large number of bodies were littered around almost in every part of the arena, either covered in blood or outright crushed. He blamed Guy for all of this. That man seemed to make everything a competition between them, and for some reason that even he doesn't know, Kakashi always indulged in those things. Guy had made a bet that he could kill more enemies than Kakashi. Kakashi, being the dutiful, eternal that he was, agreed to the bet. After almost an hour of continuous fighting, the enemy had finally stopped coming into the stadium.
Guy was standing on the other side of the arena.
He waved energetically at Kakashi.
Yo, Kakashi. How much is your count?
Is there an end to his youth? Kakashi tiredly thought, but answered anyway. 57, he answered in a bored tone.
Just as he predicted, Guy shifted to a completely different personality. Oh Kakashi. It seems you have won again, my eternal rival.
It was no secret in Konoha that he and Guy were eternal rivals. Kakashi was thankful for his face mask every time Guy chose to announce their rivalry publicly.
That man had no sense of stealth whatsoever.
People already questioned if he was mentally fit to be a ninja, it won't do for them to start questioning him as well.
Kakashi mentally sighed.
His best friend was a pain in the ass.
Just as he was about to approach Guy, Sasuke suddenly appeared beside him, with Sakura unconscious on his back.
Kakashi already had a kunai out ready, but lowered it once he saw who it was. He watched, amused, as Sasuke blinked, no doubt disoriented from the sudden travel, and proceeded to curse in a way that Kakashi almost blushed.
Though he couldn't hold back the perverted giggle upon seeing his student's position. That asshole.
I told him not to do that.
Sasuke shouted before spotting Kakashi.
He raised an eyebrow in deadpan upon hearing the perverted giggle.
What is it?
Kakashi was more than happy to point it out. I wonder what you plan on doing with her, Sasuke. Especially you are carrying her when she's unconscious.
Sasuke blinked, not understanding the reference at first.
Then he remembered that his sensei was a pervert, and then his face suddenly turned red. Don't make such useless assumptions, you perverted jerk. Kakashi refrained from commenting that this might be proof of a claim Naruto had made some time ago.
He might be gay, after all. He then turned to face the purple barrier in which his leader was trapped.
He could only hope that Sandaime would manage to survive against his former student.
XXXXXXX things were not going well for Hiruzen.
Orochimaru had been right, he was not as strong as he was 10 years ago, let alone his prime. And it showed, his movements were slow, his chakra capacity, even though it hadn't deteriorated with age, he had a limit to what he could exert now. If he exerted more, his chakra coils were in danger of permanent damage. And don't even get him started on his old joints.
He and Orochimaru engaged first in taijutsu, which rapidly progressed into ninjutsu.
At one point, Hiruzen had even managed to corner his student again. With a smirk he had thought, looks like I still got it.
Got it, his ass. Orochimaru had blocked his attacks by pulling up coffins of all things. From then on, it was no longer funny.
In fact, Hiruzen was outraged that Orochimaru had the nerve and spine to do such a vile thing.
Orochimaru had defiled the graves of both of his senseis.
Hiruzen had watched with horror-filled eyes as Orochimaru opened the graves to allow the now-resurrected Shodai and Nidame Hokage to walk out. And they looked terrible. Both of their skin was deathly pale, as it was rightly so.
Orochimaru had forcefully called the dead into the land of the living.
Hiruzen had to stop himself from facepalming when the former Hokages finally opened their mouths to speak. Even though Hiruzen knew that Hashirama-sensei was a peculiar man, with his unusually boisterous and seemingly idiotic nature, it was Tobirama-sensei who knew Hiruzen the best. It was scary how easily he could read his student. Hiruzen even suspected that Tobirama knew that he was a closet pervert, but he didn't really know, for the man never called him out on it.
Only Hashirama knew of that fact, and even he had found out by accident. But enough of that. The first words that Hashirama-sensei had spoken were, "Is that you, Sarutobi? It has been a long time."
Hiruzen had cringed how much dead he had sounded.
But somehow, that same tone from Tobirama didn't surprise him at all.
In fact, it was all he could do from facepalming.
"You have gotten old, Saru." That man was always blunt like that. Turns out, it was an extremely vile jutsu that had been created by Tobirama.
Edo Tensei was a jutsu that binds the soul of a deceased person to a living vessel, restoring the deceased as they were when they were alive in order to do their summoner's bidding. It was the ultimate insult one can give to the dead.
Why Tobirama-sensei created this, he would never know. And how Orochimaru got a hold of this, that also he would never know.
Ultimately, Hiruzen had no choice but to fight his former senseis. As the fight between them progressed, Hiruzen noted that while his opponents were certainly strong, they were nowhere near the level they were when they were alive. They were merely puppets that Orochimaru was controlling. Hiruzen would know, he was their prized student, after all. But even then, Hiruzen slowly found himself on the losing side of the battle as his age and lack of training in a long time slowly took a toll on him. Even after summoning Enma, who became an indestructible adamantine staff, he was put on the ropes by the Shodai's mastery of Mokuton and Nidame's mastery of Suiton. Even if they were puppets, their teamwork was strong enough that Hiruzen was hard-pressed to just dodge those attacks. And if things weren't bad enough already, both the bodies of the former Hokages were seemingly indestructible.
Any damage dealt to them was recovered from within seconds. This is bad. At this rate, I really would be killed. I cannot afford to let them escape this barrier. Konoha would never recover from being destroyed by its own creators. Hiruzen fought as he dodged Tobirama's attacks and used his staff to strike Hashirama in the face.
He put some distance between him and both the Hokages with a large-scale Katan Jutsu. He then suddenly remembered what happened before they started fighting.
Of course. How could I have forgotten that? Naruto gave me a scroll, saying that it had some reinforcements. I really could use a soldier pill right now.
He set Enma loose on the Hokages, while he untied the scroll. As soon as he saw the slightly changed, but still recognizable prisoner containment seal, he was confused.
Why would Naruto want to give him such a scroll right now?
But he had not time to think over it as Enma came skidding back on his feet.
"Whatever you are doing, hurry up, Sarutobi!" Enma shouted in his gruff voice.
Hiruzen wasted no more time and spread the scroll on the ground, pushing chakra into it, choosing to trust Naruto.
And boy, Naruto knew exactly well what reinforcements are.
Hiruzen stared dumbfounded at the army of blondes, no doubt shadow clones that Naruto created.
He knew Naruto had a ridiculous amount of chakra, but this?
This was a whole new level of absurd. He would have to re-evaluate the blonde, if he survived.
Orochimaru was flabbergasted as to how did the old fool manage to pull this in the middle of the battle.
Then he noticed the scroll in his hand. A prisoner containment scroll modified to seal shadow clones.
And the look on his face means someone gave it to him. I don't need to be a genius to figure out who.
But no matter, 100 shadow clones against 2 Hokages are nothing.
They will only buy the old fool some time. Sadly, Orochimaru was only partially correct.
The entire roof became a field for chaos within seconds. The changes that the first Hokage had made to the roof with his entire Mokuton only added to the clones' advantage as they took extreme pleasure in causing as much chaos as possible, with Flash Step and Hiration. Hiruzen grabbed this opportunity to rest and chuckled. This certainly was useful. But he could see that having shadow clones as back had its downfalls as well. The Hokages proved how formidable they were, for the clones started dispelling only 2 minutes after they were summoned. Hiruzen knew that this was bad, and there was no way he would be escaping today with his life. He sighed sadly as he thought about his life until today. He had made countless decisions, and just as many mistakes. He regretted what he was about to do, but there was no other option. And he was in no way calling Naruto to fight with him. Just as he was about to initiate the sequence for the jutsu that would seal the dead away, a clone flashed beside him. With so many flashes going around, Hiruzen wasn't even surprised. This backup is going to get destroyed in just 10 seconds, he said testily, watching with growing nervousness as only 20 of them remained now. Hiruzen nodded gravely. When you dispel, pass on my thanks to Naruto. I regret that I won't be escaping alive today. The clone looked at him with a surprised face. Another peculiar thing that Hiruzen had discovered was that each of Naruto's clones had a different personality. One was happy to the point of being goofy, one was lazy, one was an angry one, and there was one that was exactly like Naruto, which was the one thing that he found weird. Considering shadow clones are meant to be the user's exact copies, finding an exact copy among Naruto's different ones was certainly a new experience. This one seemed prone to be surprised every now and then. He wanted to say something, but words seemed to fail him as he could only close and open his mouth repeatedly. He then sighed, and Hiruzen found his worry growing as a determined look came onto his face. If you say that you have no choice, then I'm afraid I have no choice as well. The last clone, besides the one, was dispelled, and Hiruzen dropped into a stance again, holding Enma. This was his final stand, and he would be damned if he let Orochimaru win. Just as he was about to commence his attack, he saw the last clone beside him making a half-ram seal, dispelling a second later. What was he up to? He suddenly got a very bad feeling in his stomach. Surely he was not going to. His worst fears were confirmed when in a flash of blue, the Prime himself arrived. With a cocky smirk on his face, no less. Am I late or what? XXXXXXX. The ANBU standing outside were dumbstruck upon seeing Uzumaki Naruto. It was one thing to see his performance in the matches against two very formidable genin, it was a whole another thing to see him face off against Orochimaru of the Sannin. Naruto could easily take out an A-ranked jonin with what he did in the matches, and the ANBU were willing to bet that what they saw was not even half of what Naruto was truly capable of. But Orochimaru was no ordinary A-rank opponent. A highest-rank shinobi trained personally by the Sandaime Hokage, he was no joke of an opponent at all. To say the atmosphere was tense was the understatement of the decade. What is he doing? And ANBU barely kept from shouting. The captain narrowed his eyes behind his mask and replied, there is no doubt that Uzumaki Naruto and the Sandaime share a close bond. The reinforcements he provided him were the proof of that, if you can even call them that. In addition to that, Naruto had successfully anticipated a personal attack on Hokage-sama and prepared accordingly. Now that I think about it, it doesn't surprise me that he was alerted of the battle due to the memories of the numerous Kage Bunshin. One of them must have sent a message to him to personally come here. But he still is just a genin standing in a field of Kage-level shinobi. He would dash. I think that it is well established by now that Uzumaki Naruto is not an ordinary shinobi at all, the captain calmly refuted. Turning back to the fight, he said in almost a whisper, we just have to trust him. XXXXXXX. Naruto carefully eyed Orochimaru as he slowly shifted into a stance. This was his second time battling the Sannin, and this time, he won't be pulling anything against him. He could not afford to. However, he had to know something first. Why did you do it? Orochimaru was also not quite surprised by Naruto's appearance. His shadow clones must have relayed everything that happened. He used his control on the Edo Tensei to pull back the two Hokage for now. Who knows, he might learn something interesting. Why did I do what? Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger. Don't play games with me. Why did you defile the graves of the previous Hokage? You could have easily matched Hokage-sama, even beaten him, considering he's far from his prime.
Orochimaru chuckled, amused by the anger in front of him. I only found it fitting, and a little ironic, that the people responsible for the birth of this village will also be responsible for its death, along with the Ichibi. Naruto felt rage building within him, but he ruthlessly pushed it back. Now was not the time to lose his mind. I've already received memories of my clones. They did keep you a bit busy, but in the end, they are just clones who can get dispelled in just one hit. So I'll ask you this, what makes you think we'll just let you do what you want? Orochimaru felt a bit of anxiousness creep into him, like something bad was going to happen. Nonetheless, he didn't let this show on his face, keeping up his amused facade. You really think you have what it takes to stop me? Edo Tensei has no exploitable weakness as far as anyone knows. I am the only one who knows how to use it in the first place. Naruto smirked, despite the situation he was in. Be that as it may, you've already lost, Orochimaru of the Sannin. I've already sent the Ichibi running with its tail between his legs. This fact surprised both Orochimaru and Hiruzen. Hiruzen asked him with shock, the Ichibi has been defeated? Naruto gave him a side glance, of course. I wouldn't be here if he wasn't. Orochimaru found himself growing annoyed. Using Gaara as his weapon was a major part of his plan. To think Naruto managed to defeat him and still have energy left to fight him. He is quickly becoming a pain. He not only manages to defeat Gaara, thereby foiling my invasion by a good margin, but he even gave the old fool some reinforcements that I didn't even know of. If I don't take care of him now, he'll become a full-blown annoyance for me in the future, the snake summoner thought with a frown. Time to end this battle. Be that as it may, he mocked the young Uzumaki, you can't hope to match the might of the Hokages just yet. Maybe in the future, but only if you live through today. With that, he commanded. Naruto chuckled as he pulled out his own scroll, you should know better than that, you reptilian psychopath. Every jutsu has a weakness. He released the contents of the scroll, and Orochimaru had to fight a groan of annoyance upon seeing a very familiar sight. 100 grinning clones once again stood between the two sides of the battlefield. The Hokages halted a bit to reconsider on how to deal with this setback, but Orochimaru forced them to keep going. It's just the matter of finding it. With that, all the clones once again engaged the two Kages with glee, using the advantages their predecessors set for them before they ran out. Naruto then turned to Hiruzen with a serious look on his face. Gigi, tell me what you know about this Edo Tensei. My clones weren't able to tell me much. I'll need everything you know to devise a counter against it. Hiruzen took a moment to study Naruto. With his eyes narrowed and his hair flowing in the wind, Hiruzen was once again reminded of Minato. Cold and calculative in battle, Minato had rarely lost against someone, and at his strongest, even Jiraiya had admitted that he could not defeat Minato. To think that his son would grow so powerful as to assist the Hokage in one of his battles, right after defeating Itailed.